Can somebody be a lonely kid?
Yeah.
The lonely child may come along next. They find a safe place to just play and be by themselves, and they try and take care of their needs, but they're often feeling very lonely and forgotten.
The next younger brother, he isolated himself from everything. He was quiet. He would sleep all the time.
Okay, come here, clown.
The last role that we often see is the clown. And nobody thinks the clown ever has any problem because the clown is such a nice guy. They make everyone happy, and they watch in the family for those moments of tension. They break it up.
I would tend to make jokes that put people down and that cut them down, and just I would make fun of the obvious. I would do it so that kind of the attention would be focused off of me.
Seeing the scapegoat and the hero and the lonely child and the clown is sometimes very sad. But it's also kind of hopeful in terms of you're not the problem. If this is what you've had as your legacy, that you can find a place and find ways to heal that and move on, to be a really full person, to be real, warts and all.
Children in violent homes may swear they'll never be like their parents, but without other role models, they often repeat the same behavior. Sometimes this generational cycle of abuse is seen as early as their first dating relationships.
I started dating guys that reminded me of my dad. I didn't realize that I was dating domineering guys that were just like my father until when I was in counseling.
I did get into a relationship with someone that was like my father. Actually, that was worse than my father. I was with him for 2 years, and he was constantly telling me that I was nothing, putting me down. He would hit me for anything.
For many adult battered women, we find that when they were teenagers, they were involved in dating violence relationships. So it's important to address these issues now, because dating violence happens at almost the same rate as adult domestic violence, and teenagers die because of dating violence.
Steve and Danny began to see the generational cycle of abuse repeat itself not long after their parents' divorce. Steve began to behave like his abusive father.
I would come home from school and Danny wouldn't be doing anything, or my sister would be lying around, and I would just go in and yell, start yelling, like, clean the house up before they get home.
And we'd get in fights like that, you know, like, why, you're acting just like Dad, Steve. And he'd be like, no, I'm not, dude, don't even say that I'm acting like my dad.
So I figured out that if in order to be different than my dad, I had to constantly make conscious decisions and choices to not be like him, to not get angry about little things, to speak calmly and rationally, and to treat others with respect.
In order to stop being violent, batterers need to really think about that this is their problem. It's not about the victim, that they need to be responsible for it. And if they're willing to do that, which some people are, there's counseling available that can help them to learn how to deal with their violence and how to deal with their anger and frustration and the other feelings that they're feeling in positive ways.
Domestic violence can be particularly frustrating for teenagers because they are powerless over their parents' behavior. However, there are a variety of resources to help teens cope, including therapists, teachers, guidance counselors, relatives, and religious leaders. Kim began years of counseling and group therapy when her mother left the abuser, and Kim was placed in Orangewood Children's Home, a county home for abused children.
I went to counseling 3 times a week, and that's when the healing process started. My counselor, I was able to open up to her. I felt comfortable around her. She was so protective of me and caring and loving.
Individual counseling is very important in learning more about family violence and dealing with the feelings that are associated with it. So that's a really important resource for getting those feelings out and being able to talk about it and know that you're okay, that you're not the cause of the violence, and that it's not your fault, it's the perpetrator's fault.
There's a period of what?
Another effective resource is peer counseling, where young people are trained to help others with a variety of problems. Rashad, Orlando, and Damaris became peer counselors at their high school. The training helped them learn how to deal with their feelings.
With peer counseling, they've taught me a lot. They taught me how to listen. They've taught me how to take in opinions and to accept them. They taught me that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that's feeling like this, that I'm not the only one that's going through this.
Hi, Susan.
Kim also became involved with a peer counseling program involving young people who were once residents of the Orangewood Children's Home or similar facilities. The peer counselors meet with teenagers who are current Orangewood residents.
This program is for the kids at Orangewood, but we found that the peer counselors really get more out of it sometimes even than the kids that are there. The counselors are able to, for maybe the first time in their lives, meet up with other people that have experienced similar histories as themselves.
The peer counseling program is sort of like a support group because we all came from a common background. We understand what it means to be hurt, and we use each other as support when an issue that comes up where it's a safe environment for us to deal with our feelings and to discuss it openly.
Amber was very involved with Girls Incorporated of Orange County, which offers a variety of after-school programs.
For Amber, it wasn't that she was a bad kid and in trouble and turned it around. Amber was a very good kid who had the world on her shoulders and could have gone on to be a very compulsive, obsessive, really hard on everybody else kind of person. She found a place where she could relax and enjoy herself and try new things, and that let her be more of a teenager.
They taught me a lot about confidence and self-esteem and growing up and just accomplishing whatever I wanted to, no matter what.
Getting involved with their church was an important part of Steve and Danny's healing process.
The church has really been there for both Dan and Steve when they've needed us, when times when they've needed someone to talk to call up on the phone, and we've provided a lot of different activities for them to be a part of.
The church just gave me a lot of hope, and it gives you just something to focus on when it seems like nothing's going right.
The church also helped me release some bitterness and just helped me to forgive my dad for doing what he did to us. And I realize now that it wasn't exactly all his fault, that it happened to him too. And I could make that choice now to be different from him.
Sports and other school activities can also be helpful for teens in violent homes. For Steve and Danny, wrestling provided a healthy way to deal with some difficult emotions.
When you're in the wrestling room, it helps just take your aggressions out. You go in mad, and by the end of practice, you're just so relaxed. You just turn it into good energy instead of bad.
If you're involved in a home where there's family violence, you might want to choose one of these options, whether it be counseling or getting involved in a community organization, your church, or do something to help others. Whatever you choose to do, choose something that works for you and that you feel good about, but do something. Tell somebody what's happening to you.
Most children who grow up in violent homes are able to lead happy, productive lives, especially if they get help. Today, Amber is a freshman in college, studying to be a child psychologist.
With the kind of past that I had, that was real negative. But you have to be optimistic, and you have to understand that that's something that happened, and you can't change it or you can't go back to it.
Kim is close to graduating from college, and the years of counseling have helped her heal the wounds of her abusive childhood.
I guess right now I feel my life is much better. I think that I've stopped the cycle, and my mother helped me by going to counseling and getting the divorce so that my father was out of the home, so my brothers and I could realize that that was wrong and that that's not how we should live.
Orlando, Damaris, and Rashad will graduate from high school in June. Their experiences as peer counselors and as children growing up in violent homes have taught them some important lessons.
Anything that hurts your feelings, anything that you think is wrong, you should talk to someone about it. It might seem like that's kind of lame or something like that, but it's not, because if you talk about it, you get it out in the open, and it'll make you feel better.
Is that with a double?
Danny also graduates in June, and he's on the wrestling team that Steve coaches. Steve plans to go on to his local community college in the fall.
Oh, I hear a lot of kids all the time saying, I don't want to be like my parents. I'll never be like my dad. I'll never be like my mom. And as I look at people and I see how their lives, they tend to be just like their mom or dad. And I said to myself, my dad, I'm sure he didn't want to be like his dad, but he didn't do something. I've learned to remember the pain and remember that it hurt. And that helps me to become different than my dad. And by thinking like that, I think I'm coming along just fine.
One by one, we can make a difference, but we need everybody to step forward and say that this is inappropriate and that it is unacceptable and that they themselves are not going to repeat the violence.